Welcome, everyone. My name's Fred Kalimas. I'm a board member here at the American Museum of Fly Fishing. On behalf of the entire museum staff, the board, our members and friends, welcome to the 2021 Izaak Walton Award virtual event honoring legendary captain and guide Paul Dixon. This is our 8th Izaak Walton Award event, and the first time that we are hosting this in a virtual setting. In light of these uncommon times in which we find ourselves, this seems the appropriate platform for this evening's event, but I promise it's going to be a fun evening. You're going to learn a lot about a fascinating man, one who's made a lot of contributions to the fly fishing world, and there'll be some fun stories and anecdotes along the way. So for those of you who are new to us, new to our audience and the museum, I just want to say a few words about the museum before we get the event going. We were founded in 1968, so we're now in our 53rd year, if I'm doing my math correctly. We are the stewards of the history of the pastime and all aspects of it in terms of the artifacts, the fishing gear, the rods, the reels, the flies, anything that you can think about that would pertain to the pastime. We're the repository for that, and we have a carefully curated collection that's been built over 50 years, and it's really fascinating to see some of the stuff that's come into the museum, and it teaches people about the evolution of the sport. And of course, we then share that back to the fly angling, community and the community at large as an educational resource, as a research resource, and so that people can understand how this pastime has evolved over the years and learn more about, sort of the primitive techniques up through what we now have is, obviously very modern techniques and modern equipment. And of course, it's the ongoing support of folks like you that make it possible for us to continue our mission of giving back to our community and educating folks, with all that we have to offer. Tonight, we are joining you from 2 locations. I'm here in, well, actually multiple locations. I'm here in Manchester, Vermont, our headquarters, where I'm joined by our executive director, Sarah Foster, and our director of development, Sam Pitcher. And we will also be joining you from Boca Raton, where our guest host, Andy Mill, has generously opened his home for the event. And in fact, where Paul Dixon is with Andy right now. And then we've got 2 dignitaries in the industry that are joining us as well, Nick Curcione, who's in California, and Bob Popovics, who's in New Jersey. I believe that's correct. And for probably most of you know their names, but for those of you who don't, Andy's certainly going to enlighten you to all the contributions that these folks have made. So a couple words about the Izaak Walton Award, and then I'm going to pass the floor over to Andy. Since 2014, we have been presenting the Izaak Walton Award annually to an individual that we feel, lives by the complete angler philosophy. Simply put, those who share their passion and through their involvement in the pastime get others involved, get others passionate about the pastime. Folks who offer great leadership qualities and bring along people who are new to the sport, or seasoned veterans who can somehow learn from these individuals, and people who make contributions. Simply put, folks who get other people involved and excited about the pastime. And certainly Paul Dixon exemplifies all of those qualities. And again, you're going to learn a lot more about him tonight, and there are going to be some fun stories, but Paul has made many and deep contributions to the pastime of fly fishing. And again, we'll learn more about that tonight through Andy. So before I pass the baton, 2 quick thank yous to Marshall Cutchin at Midcurrents, who's making all of this possible, If it were not for Marshall, you all would probably be staring at a blank screen and not hearing a thing. So Marshall has worked his magic, and we can't thank him enough for that. And also to Alex Ford, who is our social media and marketing guru here at the museum, and his contributions to the museum are tremendous. And he's joining Paul and Andy down in Florida tonight just to make sure everything runs smoothly there. And I have to say a special word about Alex. In the last year, where we've all had to adapt to these new ways of communicating with each other and putting information out there for folks to, digest, et cetera. We haven't been able to have visitors until fairly recently. Alex has done a superb job of bringing our message, to the fly angling community through the various social media platforms. Finally, our gracious host, Andy Mill. Here's a man who has made more contributions to the sporting world than one can keep track of. First, as an Olympic and World Cup skier, he competed in 2 Olympics and 2 world champions. And I think, if I've got this right, Andy, held a 9-year stretch of being the top downhill men's ski racer in the United States. Andy then took that same hard work ethic and same enthusiasm and applied it to the pursuit of fish. And I know Andy's been all over the world and pursued a lot of different species of fish, but he's certainly best known for his pursuit of tarpon. And I think that that's kind of Andy's brand, if you will. Andy has won 12 tarpon tournaments, 5 Gold Cup, 6 Golden Fly, and 1 Holly. And I think Andy is only one of 2 anglers who's won tournaments for bonefish, tarpon, and permit on the fly. So here's a man who's really applied himself to this pastime. He currently serves as a trustee of the International Game Fish Association. He's the author of A Passion for Tarpon, which is a really fascinating and entertaining read about all things, tarpon angling. And if you don't have that in your library, I strongly encourage you to find a copy of it. It's a very good read. Andy enjoyed a 20-year broadcasting career in sporting arenas of both skiing and fishing. And currently he's hosting the Millhouse podcast with his son, Nick. And this is a podcast that focuses on the outdoor pastimes, primarily fishing and hunting. And I believe it's currently viewed in almost 100 countries. So there's my introduction to folks. Without any more words here, I'm going to turn the floor over to Andy. And if I missed anything, I apologize, but hopefully that sort of covered things. Andy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Fred. I hope we didn't lose half of our audience in that introduction, but thank you so very much. And with that being said, I traveled the world, literally. We hosted 81 TV shows over 7 years at one time. Skiing on the Olympic team, I was around the world, a gazillion times. And in our travels, we always meet people, we see and feel great events, but I am so honored that I've been, asked to host this event tonight, because Paul Dixon is one hell of a human being. He has done so much. And Paul, you are so loved by the fish, the anglers, and all of your friends. And the power of love is outstanding. I'm going to talk about a lot of things that you've done, but I think when you really connect with people, you connect with conservation as you have the power to reach out and touch people, but also to make changes. And over the course of your career, what you've done, you have profoundly enriched our sport. You have had a huge voice in the Northeast. You have brought money to the table to fight for the good deeds that we are doing, you are doing, BTT is doing, and trying to save the striped bass. And with that being said, Marshall, if you don't mind, let's just cue this video right now that will profile your presence in the Northeast.
Montauk Point, at the eastern end of Long Island, 120 miles from New York City, is a world unto itself. Under the revolving eye of its historic lighthouse, the public parking lot is crowded much of the year with surf fishermen's vehicles.
Boy, that certainly is a beautiful shot.
Thanks, Flip. Appreciate that. We put a lot of time into it and just trying to put it together and make it work.
It really shows, too.
Thanks so much.
From his tackle shop in East Hampton, Paul Dixon is spreading the faith of saltwater fly rodding. And today, he's graciously agreed to show me why the fly rod and Montauk Point are a good match.
Yo, Paulie. Congratulations, man. Nobody deserves this award better than you. Nobody likes fishing better than Paul Dixon. I mean, I've known a lot of fishermen. We all have. Nobody likes fishing better than Paul. I just want to say thank you. I love you, man. You know, you've been the best to me, and I really appreciate it. Congratulations. You really deserve this.
Paulie, I just want to thank you so much for being such a great ambassador for the sport, such a great conservationist. You've done decades and decades of great work. This award is very well deserved. Congratulations, and I can't wait to get back on the bow of your boat, looking for some whompers.
Paulie D, big congratulations, bud. I mean, I can't think of a better person for this award. You are the pinnacle of what it is to be a fly fishing guide. You live and you breathe it. Your passion, what you've done for conservation, your career, your stories. It's really amazing, man. Being a young fishing guide coming up, you've always been a role model, a mentor, and I've learned so much from you over the years, and I'm forever grateful to call you a really great friend.
Congratulations, Paul, as this year's recipient of the Izaak Walton Award. I can think of no one more deserving or fitting to receive this honor than you. You're a wonderful angler, a wonderful friend, and I wish you the very best for the coming fishing season.
Whenever you're ready. All right, I think he's ready. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, very nice. Very nice, Flip. Boy, he's a pretty one. Nice.
Captain Dixon, congratulations from all your friends at Bonefish Tarpon Trust on winning the Izaak Walton Award. You have been an important part of our organization from the early years. You were there for our very first science symposium, and then you went on to become one of the greatest advocates for flats conservation. It's a real honor for us to share this evening with you.
Hey Paul, congratulations on this award. I know it's really important. Do you ever have one of those fly-away hair days on the water? I'm sure you do, darling. And I certainly do. I'm having one now, as you can see. I'm going to just press this button so that this phone points the other way, because I want you to see this. That is a striped bass made by some bloke I know. Anyway, I've got that waiting for you as a little gift next time I see you. All right, congratulations. Here comes my big finger to press the off button.
Hey, dear, congratulations on your award, my man. Like you told me years ago when we landed my first tarpon with you down in Key Largo, even the blind squirrel finds the acorn every once in a while. Anyway, big congrats, brother. Look forward to fishing with you soon. Take care.
Oh, I got one. Paul, what's up? Well, looks like you got yourself a little albacore there. Boy, these little babies pull like crazy, don't they? Yeah, this is our equivalent of the bonefish, or the speedster of the Northeast. And false albacore are just a tremendous fish. They'll run 100 yards, lickety-split, and they'll dog you all the way back in. He does. He feels a lot like a little bonita or a little tuna or something like that. Very fast fish. Little torpedoes, built for speed, a lot of power. I'll tell you, it's the toughest 10-pound fish I've ever run across.
It has been a day for the Chronicles. Fair weather, friendly companions, and great fishing under the lighthouse at Montauk Point.
Well, Paul, this video exemplifies what I mentioned before the video about the power of love and your relationship with the fishery in the Northeast. And, you know, these testimonials are outrageous. I mean, Roger Waters, excuse me, are you kidding me? Tell me a little bit about the video we just saw, the fishery and your friendships that you've culminated over all these years.
You know, it's funny. You know, I used to watch the Walker's Cay Chronicles like a madman every time it came out. I just loved the show, and I was fortunate enough when I first opened my shop to meet John Applenapp, who was actually his father owned Walker's Cay, and he introduced me to Flip, and they were doing the show and everything else, and came up with the idea maybe the Walker's Cay Chronicles should go up north and see what's going on in the bass world and sort of branch out from Florida and the Bahamas and where they'd been before. And so, Flip made the trek up, and it was funny because we hit a hurricane right before it. And Bob Popovics had come up, and we were going to shoot 2 shows so that we could save some money for the production, and Bobby was going to shoot one on the beach and I was going to shoot one on shore, and sure enough, the day that Flip arrives, a hurricane comes in the next day. So we struggled through, but we ended up getting the 2 shows, and that was sort of the beginning. It sort of put Montauk on the map, and years later, Bob Applenapp, who owned Walker's Cay, or a few years later, had said, Paul, I'm going to have to start treating you nicer now, because it really, for the show, the ratings went up because all the growth in fly fishing at the time was happening in the Northeast, and so the Northeast was just thrilled. They couldn't believe that America's fish, the striped bass, was being highlighted by their favorite fly fishing show. So it was really a fun time, and Bobby and I became really close friends and everything, and just being able to share that time and that sort of in that air and everything was wonderful.
Well, we also have 2 distinguished guests tonight, and Big Bobber, this is my tie for the evening.
Yeah, Bob, I got one too. When they
Hey, wait.
see Bobby's put on his tie.
Everybody knows who Bob Popovich is. You've got 3 books out. You're in 2 Hall of Fames, and probably the greatest fly tyer on the planet. And when I first met you, Bob, you didn't know me from Adam. And I've always seen you, the big smiles on your face and your effervescent. I went over, I don't know if I gave you a big old hug, but I wanted to be a part of your life. And I can't imagine, you guys getting it together, 2 of the same, brothers from different mothers. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with Paul.
Well, my relationship with Paul is really based on a lot of just simple friendship. Like, how you started this saying love. You talked about love. One thing that Paul always does, probably a phrase that he uses more than anything else, is "I love you, man." How many times do you hear that? And we kid him about it, but we also mean it for real. Paul's got that kind of a personality that comes at you, and you can't help but gravitate towards it. And the one thing that I do recall the most about Paul in my earlier years in my career getting started, we get a lot of promises from people, let's do this, let's do that. But when Paul Dixon said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we certainly did. And we did for year after year after year. And I've been very blessed to be in his friendship for so long. And all the people that he introduced me to, just like John Applenap and his father. My God, flying at Walker's Cay, I still remember on their airplane. It's just absolutely an amazing thing, to the point where I said, what am I doing here? You know, this was far beyond anything that I thought that I would be anywhere near part of, all because of Paul. And that's just one story. So now I owe a lot to Paul. I'm very proud for him for getting the Izaak Walton Award. I'm not very political, very conservation minded as Paul is. Paul and I are really it's built pretty much on friendship, but I would always get briefed by Paul every time we would get together on what was the latest thing to be concerned with and where things were going. And I could get brought up to snuff, and I can believe what he said. He was so passionate about it. So our relationship is strong for many, many years, as if it was day one. So I look forward to many more times, I hope.
Well, you can only imagine how many thousands of friends Paul Dixon has. But when we asked him, who two people would he like to have visit and storytell with us this evening, he mentioned not only you, Bob Popovics, but Nick Curcione. Nick, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Nick is a very well-known flycaster. He's written 3-4 books himself. And we're talking about household names here, Bob Popovics and Nick Curcione. And you too, Nick, have got really great stories and love for Paul. Speak about your relationship with him and how it's grown over the years.
Well, you know, I echo a lot of Bob's experiences and his sentiments toward Paul. I texted Paul and I said, Paul, when did we first meet? Because I couldn't remember, but it had to be in the late 80s. And I was on the newly developed Orvis Saltwater Advisory staff. There were about a half a dozen of us. Rick Ruoff was was one of the stars, and Frank Catino, I think, had worked to put it together. Anyway, I had just written the Orvis Guide to Saltwater Fly Fishing, and I get this call from Paul Dixon, and I don't know who he is, and he's managing the Orvis store in Manhattan, which was the #1 and still is #1 Orvis store in the nation. And as I remember, he had me out for a book signing, but what sealed the deal was he said, well, we could do some fishing. I said, this is great. And I said, you know, Paul, when Paul said, you know, he was a native Californian from Newport Beach. And I said to Paul, you know, when I leave California to fish, I want to sight fish, because, you know, 90% of the saltwater fishing in California and Baja, you're talking sinking lines and blind casting. And Paul said, well, you know, there's really a great sight fishery out here at the east end of Long Island for stripers. I said, you're kidding. He said, yes. He said, the water is clear as what you find in the Keys. I said, when can we get together? I want to get out. Anyway, it started from there. As Bob was saying, you know, Paul he is full of love. And he was using that expression before I think it was a Budweiser commercial on TV, I love you, man, or whatever. But Paul, and I always referred to Paul because I am a New Yorker, and I never left that. I never called him Paul. It was always Paulie. And it just such a great experience. He's not only a terrific guide, he's just a terrific person. I mean, I think he's unmatched in terms of what he knows about fishing, both up in the Northeast and the Keys. I mean, but really, it's just a pleasure to spend time with him on and off the water. And I can tell you, he has infinite patience, because when you fish with me, I am going to test your tolerance level. And Popovics is laughing. Bob and I had great times together, fishing with Paul. And I'm sure Paul, just the three of us, it's just a magical time, precious time. I can't say enough about him. And I can't think of anybody, and I know this is trite to say this, but I can't think of anybody more deserving of the award. And I was very surprised, because Paul and I, we don't get to see each other very often, and especially with this COVID thing, and the fly fishing shows aren't going, but because at least I was able to come out and we'd connect a lot, like at the Jersey show or whatever. And then, like, out of the blue, he calls me. He says, "Listen, we're going to have this virtual event. I'm being honored, by the American Museum of Fly Fishing." And he says, "I want you and Bob." And of course, Bob Clauser came up, by the way, and Bob is listening to this, and I have to get this in. Clauser wants to extend his congratulations to you, Paul. But anyway, he says, I want you and Popovic to join me on this. And I was like, wow, I am like so honored. So I guess it was back in the late 80s, Paul, that we first hooked up, right? When you were at the store in Manhattan.
Yeah, it was, and I remember it vividly coming, and the how we hit it off, and the humor, and I always loved Nick, because when he told me that he was a professor at Loyola, and I said, "Well, what'd you teach?" And he said, "Deviant behavior." And I said, "God, I love this guy." So anyway, but and thank you for actually Bob Clauser called me the other day, and once again, because I used to see Bob at the show and everything else, and it was such a pleasure, because the shows are gone and because of this COVID and everything else. But we sat and we just started telling fishing stories for an hour on the phone, and I just love Bob, and and now he's in Florida. He's telling me how he's catching his tarpon, and we're comparing notes. So it's great to hear from everybody, and actually to have Zoom, because if it wasn't for this system, I mean, you'd sort of, what would you do with your friends now and stuff? So it's great, so anyway.
It's a great way to connect. Obviously you can reach out, but on a phone, you can't see the expression, can't see the eyes and the love that we all have for each other. Paulie, say hello to Bob Clauser. He just signed in saying he's watching and he loves you.
Oh, Bobby, we're just talking about you. Bob Clauser, a big hug, kiss, everything. I love you, man.
When Paul answers the phone, he says, "I love you too." But when Paul answers the phone, he goes, "Dude," and I always wonder, were you a big Lebowski fan? The great Lebowski?
The funny, everybody asks me this, they said, "Where'd you go?" I grew up in Newport Beach in the surfing community. And the guys early on, before Dude became on the beach, it was do this, do that. And it was actually something that we did to sort of make fun, to sort of like, yeah, dude, and then I forget, Spicoli came out in the movie, and what was it, with Sean Penn.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And so it became something as a joke. And then it became something that just became an everyday thing. And all of a sudden it's like, "I love you, man." It just caught on. And now it's just the vernacular, It's like an answer when somebody says, "How you doing?" You say, "Oh, cool." In the beginning, it was like, what?
Well,
anyway.
Paul, you follow these great lists of Izaak Walton Award winners, previous winners. Last year was Flip Pallett, Tom Rosenbauer, Rachel Flem, Jim Klug, James Prozek, Tom Davidson, and the great Ed Jawowski. What does it mean to you to follow this group of icons?
Yeah, I asked myself, what am I doing here?
I mean, that was Flip Pallet last year, man.
No. And Flip was one of my idols. You know, I used to, when I watched the Walker's Cake Chronicles, that's why I was really taken back because, you know, to be in the same, category or even, whatever, I was just, sort of astounded. And Flip's an icon in the industry. He's just, he's one of my favorite people because I not only got to know Flip, but I felt like I knew him way beforehand and everything else. And Ed Jaworowski, and I know all these people. And Tom Rosenbauer and I went back to Orvis. Tom was, the man at Orvis and everything. And we spent a lot of the early days at the guide rendezvous and everything else. So, they're just, in my book, they're legends. It's just and I don't, I was just a guy, fishing, and so, it's I don't even know what to say. To be in the same room, let alone the same museum.
No, and like we've all said, there's no one more deserving than how richly deserved this is. But I want to ask you a question. We've been together the last couple of days, and you made mention that you were in grade school, and inside of a folder you were reading Outdoor Life, and you were caught by your teacher, and your teacher said to your mom, "He's never going to amount to anything." What do you have to say to that teacher?
Well, that was part of my closing remarks. But
redundancy is okay here.
Yeah, it's funny, and if anybody that I would like to have here, at this thing would be my mom, because I think that for her, she was the first person to put a fishing rod in my hand when I was 3 years old, sitting on Balboa Bay, and I just never got off the water. I was one of those kids that was searching under the dock, and I was, I just became enthralled with it. I collect lizards. I would go diving, and we'd go spearing stuff. I spent every minute outdoors. She put up with all my pets and the snakes and the lizards and the fish tanks, and the fish tank that, we left for 4 days. It was a 100-gallon tank that I fixed and repaired. And we came back and it's like, where's the fish? And then it was, where's the water? So it had gone and leaked out of the house. But my mom was, the one that really got me, into fly fishing. So, not fly fishing, but fishing. So, I wish that she was here. And when that teacher said that, she sort of took it personally, and that's just crazy. I can't believe, whatever. And so it would be great because my mother always liked to get the last laugh. And I think this would have given her the opportunity to have the last laugh.
Well, kudos to you and this great success. I just want to go through a couple things here. You used to host the Pirates Party up in Montauk, which popularized the fishing up there. You hosted the Guide House TV show in Southern California. You fished Baja. You started the first saltwater school for Orvis. You had your own store in the Hamptons. Walker's Cay. You helped raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. You've got a huge heart. And you sank a boat. We won't talk about sinking the boat. But when we talk about love and the power of love, so prime example, we're going to go fishing in the Bahamas, and we talked to the owner of this mothership, and we asked if we could use the boat, and we came up with this idea: if we can find maybe 4 guys that are willing to spend and donate a lot of money to BTT, we'll take them fishing. Paul made 4 phone calls, and you raised $100,000. We've got a day of fishing with you and I, and somebody had bid $10,000. We had a dinner last night with a gentleman, and we were speaking about this $10,000 day of fishing that somebody's given us. And he said, well, why don't you give 2? And Paul says, are you interested? And the guy said, I'll give you 15,000. That is the power of your influence and love to everybody. And with that said, Marshall, if you don't mind, show us a screen of how people can donate money to the museum. I think that, you know, if you miss this screenshot, call the museum, reach out to the American Museum of Fishermen. And it's just so valuable to keep what history is. If we don't know what history is, we don't know who we are. And I think that with our podcast, my son and I, Millhouse, we interview all these legends. And I personally don't want to see history go away. And that is the mission of, you know, the American Museum. So anybody that's interested, please, everybody in the panel is going to donate, and we need to raise some more money. And so far, because Paul is here, we're honoring him tonight. I think we're already at $35,000, almost $40,000. And last year, I think they only did like 20. So again, Paul, they're coming to the table because of you. And we all have to thank you. But of all the things I made mention, Paul, let's talk about a little bit about maybe the striper fishing briefly, and whether the striper fishing up there has a chance with the people that you have behind you, and they're trying to get people in the powers to be to help that cause up there.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny how fate almost, you know, whatever, you know, I just feel I'm the luckiest guy, because when I first came out east and everything else, I couldn't believe that you could fish in your backyards. In California, and Nick will tell you this too, you know, you could go in the bays and you could do this, but if you wanted good fishing, you had to travel. If you were going trout fishing in Southern California, you had to travel. When I came out to the east end of Long Island, I couldn't believe that you could walk out your back door and go hunting, fishing, do whatever you want. And that's what I thought was the great thing. When I first got out there, and I was always intrigued by stripers, they had stocked them in California in the early days, turn of the century. They'd sort of disappeared in my area, but the first one I ever caught was in Newport Bay. And it was only because this kid had showed me some of the areas that he was fishing, and you know, so by the time that I started my store and working at Orbit's, the striper had been wiped out. And in the early 80s and everything else, it was gone. And so by the time, I didn't even know it was gone, but I knew this was striper country. So when I first started fishing out there, I didn't touch a striper for 5 years. I couldn't figure out what the deal was. And then you heard the story that there was a moratorium on them and that they totally disappeared and they're trying to save them. So over that period, the striper made this amazing recovery. And within 10 years, it was the greatest conservation success story of all time in this country. They came roaring back. And I just happened to open my store and be out there when it all started happening. And so this abundance of fish and showing what some great conservation, you know, would do, it really worked. And Mother Nature, you know, it comes back. And so the heydays when Nick and Bobby and I were all fishing out there, it was biblical. It was unbelievable. The flats, I didn't even have to leave the harbor. They were everywhere. And so the fishery itself was just, and then, you know, they started changing regulations, and they started, you know, well, let's keep one fish at 28 inches. In those days, it was 36 inches, and we begged them not to. Let's err on the side of caution. Then it went to 2 fish, and then the commercial take was greater. And and I never thought in my lifetime that I would see the stripers, you know, disappear. But that's what's happening now. There's a lot of fish in different categories, but you can definitely see the downward decline of the striped bass. And I never thought that would happen. So I just, you know, I just got involved. I had to, you know, I was like, wow, this is, so I just, you know, they started a new organization, the American Saltwater Guides Association. I was asked to be on it, and I jumped in because it needed the help. So the striper it can be saved, it can be happen, but people have to get involved now. It's really important, because for the next 20 years, I don't know what's going to happen, you know, but right now is the time we're trying to fight some of these battles.
Well, in the heyday, you had this party up there, the Pirates Party. Talk a little bit about all the personalities that were there and what kind of ambiance took place.
Well, you know, that all started because, when I opened my store, one of the first people that walked in, I looked out the window and three guys get out of a car and the beer cans start rolling out of the car. And so it was John Applenapp, his Captain Jimmy, and the first mate of the Sea Lion too, with Jack Knoll. And so they came in and we started talking and we hit it off right away. And they were into the same thing, the sight fishing, this and that. I had a skiff. John said he was getting a skiff. And I'll never forget, as he left, he said, well, I'm going to become your newest best friend. And he did. We started talking and everything. So John and I fished together, and this whole crew, we were all out there trying to, discover and figure out what was going on, doing all this. And like I said, it was just insane how good it was, So one day John turns around and he says, we got to show this to Lefty. And I didn't know Lefty. I knew who Lefty was. And I admired Lefty for years from afar. But I just wasn't one of those guys that would walk up at a show and say, Lefty, whatever. So John knew him. So John turned around and said, I'll go to Lefty. But he goes, maybe he'd be more inclined to come. You know all his friends. Why don't you call his friends and see if his friends would come? So I called Bobby and I called Nick and I, just a bunch of Ed Jaworowski, and I think I called Klauser and I called, just all these guys that were friends, and said, hey, we're trying to get Lefty to come out and see this, the fishery. Nick, I think, had seen it by then, was blown away, like count me in, and Bobby too, So anyway, so Lefty comes and he gets back to John and he says, John, I think I can do that. And John said, well, gee, Lefty, I hope you don't mind because we invited a few of your friends. And Lefty said, well, why the hell do I need them? Laughingly, And so he came out, and when he saw it, he couldn't believe it. And I had other guys my first customer in my store was a really, great guy, great angler. One of the greats of the sport that people don't know about is Gordy Hill. And Gordy Hill had been in the fishing Long Island for 50 years. Gordy is now 90 years old. And he couldn't believe it either. He knew Lefty. So we just started gathering. So the first year, everybody gathered together. They had a wonderful time. Lefty was floored. He said, Paul, can we do this again? And that's when it started. And so for the next 5 years, and it grew. Jose Wahebe came, John Cole, who wrote the book of the Tarpon, Peter Matheson, who was a very well-known writer, Jimmy Buffett came, for some of the parties and what, John Alexander, a famous painter, all these great friends and guys. And we just gathered to have fun for, about 4 or 5 days and fish for the flats for stripers in the Northeast. And Lefty became my biggest proponent. He sent me more people and he's like, you want to go see something, you go out to the East End and look at those striped bass out, So that's how the Pirates party got going. And Bobby and Nick, I don't know how many we all did, but I think it was 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So you called it the Pirates Party because of all the participants, or what took place?
I'm going to go with participants.
Well, we've got a few questions from the audience out there, and one is, I think I know who it comes from. And she says, how do you juggle marital life with the pressures of being the great fishing celebrity?
Oh boy. It's funny. Now I'm getting all my stuff, are being taken away, but I have the most understanding, wonderful wife in the world, Ellen. And she's put up with it for a long time, and she's gone up and down the coast with me, so that I could pursue my dream. We spend half the year up in the East End, and we spend 4 months or more down here in the Keys. And if it wasn't for Ellen, this would never have happened. It was one. I love you, honey. So, like I said, you guys are taking all my closing remarks away.
I'm sorry. You guys mind if I tell a quick story about that?
Please do.
About being married and how that works. Well, in my life, at the time, I was really getting into the tarpon scene, and I was starting to fish tournaments, and I was doing well, and I was possessed. I was probably more possessed and more focused and clear-headed about winning tarpon tournaments than I was as an Olympic skier. Because when I was younger, I really didn't have the wisdom to understand what was taking place. I was 23, then 27. There was a lot of stuff going on back then. But when I became a tarpon fisherman, I had a family, my kids were young, and everything was ironed out. I had great jobs. But in May, I wanted to be in the Keys. And you can only imagine how many tennis balls I saw hit over a net over the years. But at that time of year, I didn't want to see a tennis ball. I had to go catch a poon. So I had this discussion with Chrissy. And I said, you need to let me have me so that I can have me to have you. Because without me, there's no combo. And I was adamant about that. But she wasn't hearing anything about it. So I said, look, I can live with tarpon for the rest of my life. You, I'm not so sure. About 5 years later, the poon and I got real tight. And the poon and I are still tight. But anyway, where am I going to go from there? But anyway, here's another question. And, again, it comes from the audience. What is the greatest moment that you've had on the water with a client, if there is such a moment or such a fish?
Wow, there's been so many of them. But I'll tell you one of the most since you're asking this, since I've got the guys with me, I can have two memorable moments.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So
I'm nervous.
Yeah. So anyway, I would say one of them was Nick came down and he was going to fish with me in the Keys and everything. And so we went out and, the first day we ran into a bunch of tarpon, but we couldn't get them. But the second day we run out and Nick's like, boy, I don't know. Let's see what, and I find this huge bonefish and it's following a ray. And Nick, about the third time in, hooks this bonefish and we land it. And it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I said, Nick, what we got to do is we should go see for tarpon, go for a permit, because I know when the tarpon are going to be later. So we run across this, the bay and everything else. And we find these permit and Nick's standing on his line as he's throwing, but he finally figures it out. And as the school of permit goes by, it's a little late and the fly lands behind the school. But the last school and the fish wheels around, goes over, pins the fly, and we land the permit, So anyways, so the next thing we spent the next 3 hours throwing the tarpon and jumping tarpon, but we could never land the tarpon. And I so wanted, with Nick to get the Grand Slam, which is, the pinnacle of sort of the flats fishing. And another story with Bobby, we went out and Bobby brought his buddy Lance down to the Keys, and they'd never really seen the tarpon and the tarpon fish and everything else. And in those days, Bobby was filming a lot. And so Bobby was on the back of the boat filming. We had caught some smaller tarpon early on and, we're having a great day. And anyway, so we run down the coast and I see this school of tarpon. It's one of the largest schools I've ever seen. It probably had 300 to 400 fish in this school, long string. And I said, oh my God, you guys, we're going to get 30 shots into this school, where this is under. So I set up for him and 5 minutes later, they come down and his buddy Lance, Bobby's sitting on the back of the boat. His buddy Lance throws the fly, said, wait, let the lead fish swim by. Well, they bunched up a little, the lead fish doesn't swim by, it just garbages the fly. And so we hooked this thing and it's a monster and it goes by the boat. And Lance had told us all day long that, we got one about 60, 70 pounds. I said, that's the perfect size. And he said, no, I want to get a big one. Well, we all laughed because it was like, Lance, now you got a big one. So it ended up that we fought this thing and it got wrapped in a sea fan. So I had to dive off the boat, and I dove down. I told everybody to put the cameras down, and the next thing I know, the fly line pops up. I get back in the boat. Later that night, Bobby's showing the film and we're congratulating each other. And it's just like, that's wonderful. Oh my God, look at the film we captured, we did. And in the film, I noticed that he was filming behind me as I jumped back in the boat, and that I was going bald. And I never knew I was going bald, you know. So anyway, but
Well,
those
it's
are
not
some.
back anymore, Paul.
The what?
The bald spot's not only in the back anymore.
Exactly. But those are, you know, I mean, there's a lot of stories and great times, but those were really memorable, great times with great friends. And that's what it's all about.
You know, we heard, you know, in the early years of Walkers and going over on the sea line at Walkers over there with Flip and the big boat that they had. And I remember watching Walkers like so many, you know, of us that gravitated to the saltwater over the years because of Flip and Walkers. What was it like to be over at Walkers on that boat after fishing, sitting on those couches and developing that fishery? You know, John Alplin, of whom we're going to go over there with on Sunday, you know, his family owned that area. That must have been pretty close to your heart.
You know, it was, you know, it was just sharing that and being the thing that was really cool, at least to me, and looking back on it and everything else. John and I had kids that were the same age. And so, you know, we were raising our kids and we were taking them to the island. The girls got along, the kids got along. It was just a magical time. And we were taking the Sea Lion 5 out, which was their supply boat to the island. And we would tow skiffs behind it. And we just went exploring. And in those days, there was no, you know, all the lodges weren't built. There was no North Riding Point and Pelican Bay and all these. So it was really a magical time because it was, you know, to me, it's a lot of this is the exploring, it's the adventure, and it's the adventure with good friends. And you know, I could never thank John enough for the, you know, for the early days and being able to experience, and the people. His father was always there. His father was a wonderful, you know, individual, dry sense of humor. Bob Appleknapp was a hoot, you know. So it was a great time. I just, you know, it was special. It was magical.
Is there any window of time that you would like to go back and relive? And if so, what would that be?
Boy, you know, probably those windows of time, hanging with these guys. And, you know, in those days, you know, now it's become where you're so booked that you have to plan so ahead of time and everything else. You know, in the early days when we were building the business, that was the time that I got to explore with Nick and Bobby, and we got to do this stuff and really spend some time and go places. I used to go down to Bobby's place in New Jersey and fish with him, and then we go down to Harker's Island. And with Nick, you know, I used to go to California. I remember Nick going out in Redondo Harbor or something, chasing Bonita, you know. So, you know, those were the magical times that, you know, the early days in the Keys. And, you know, I guess when, you know, there was a lot more fish and things were, you know, a little better environmentally and stuff. And, you know, so, you know, but it basically, it's all spending the time with the friends in those early days and stuff and sharing this passion. That was the fun.
Go back 27 years. What would you do differently with what you know now?
Pay cash for your boats. Don't finance anything.
I read off all these attributes that you've done. Tell us the story about sinking your boat. That's one of my biggest fears. What the heck happened with that?
Oh God. So I come later to find out they call them sink crafts, but I had a sea craft and I was fishing with two famous authors. You know, one of them had written the Pulitzer Prize, Phil Caputo, and John Katzenbach. And Phil had written a book on Vietnam, of his experiences in Vietnam and everything. So he was, as they say, a really cool guy and somebody that are really, you read this book and what he went through and everything in Vietnam, it was incredible. So we had these blitzing bass inside. And I said, you guys are just too close. We can't go in there, but we'll just wait here for him. Well, we didn't know at the time that there was a hurricane off Bermuda. And so it basically, you know, we were sitting outside waiting and everything. And we're all just talking, sitting on the boat. And all of a sudden I just happened to glance behind me and I see that this monster swell. And all of us looked at each other, is like, that a wave? You know, and I said, hold on, you guys. And you know, I started going towards the wave and we never, you know, made it. The thing broke way outside. And the next thing, it filled the back end of the boat. And I thought we were fine, you know, but the Seacraft has its scuppers where it drains the water very low. And with the weight in the boat, instead of the water going out, it started coming back in. And so it slow rolled, you know, and we weren't that far. We were on the boat or what. So we dog paddled inshore, the boat was gone. But that weekend they lost 7 boats, you know, because of this swell that nobody really knew was it sends out these pre-waves, you know, and these huge things. So, you know, unfortunate, but you can't, you know, if you're out in the water as many years and everything else, you know, Mother Nature's bound to deal you some. I've been in storms running through the Everglades and, you know, where you got lightning and thunder chasing you. I mean, Andy, you've seen that. I mean, we've all, you know, run across stuff like that, you know, but if you're out there in the water, you're dealing with the ocean and Mother Nature, you're, you know, it's a tough mistress, so to speak.
They get a refund?
Yeah.
No refunds.
I don't.
Well, dude, on behalf of everybody, the audience out there, you know, Nick and Bobby and everybody at the museum, you know, well done. You know, kudos to you. And at this point, I'm going to send it back to Fred, who's going to present you this great Izaak Walton Award.
Wow.
I'm back. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
I don't know if all of you here, Andy, Paul, Bob, Nick, if you can see the tributes that have been pouring in during this process, this evening. But I've been watching it, and it's pretty fascinating to see how many people you've touched, Paul. You know, there have been these great stories. You know, there's been some really fascinating stuff bouncing back and forth. But I've been watching on the side, and I don't know if you can see this or not, Paul, but clearly there are a lot of people out there that think a whole lot about you, and you should be proud of that. That's to be able to touch that many lives with what you do, your enthusiasm, your love for the pastime, and sharing that with folks in the way that you do. And you know, people can hear that in these stories. You've touched a lot of people, and that's not something that a lot of people can do. And clearly it's who you are, and you're enthusiastic about things. You want to share that enthusiasm. And I hope you get a chance to see some of these at some point that have come in for you. And, you know, I was listening to these stories with Nick and Bob and Andy, and, you know, some of the things that I've been reading here tonight. And everybody talks about how you have shared so much love, and, you know, everybody's like, oh God, you're always saying, I love you, man. That's great. But what came to my attention, what was brought to my attention, and listening to the stories, but then seeing all of these tributes come in, is how much you're loved. The community obviously has a very real passion for who you are. And boy, that's, you know, that's a special gift to know that you're loved by a lot of people, and you'll see that from all these things coming in. It's really impressive. And I think that, you know, I can talk about all the incredible contributions you've made, and, you know, all of that, but it's been covered tonight. I mean, we know why, you know, it is that you're receiving this award, but more than anything, it's because of how you've touched people and how you have shared your enthusiasm and your leadership and all of these elements that make you who you are, that I think is the best representation of all of this Izaak Walton Award, and living by this complete angler philosophy. And you know, based on all these great stories and all these great tributes, I mean, there's no one more deserving than you. You know, here we are, the museum, we're the stewards of the history of this pastime, and you're becoming a part of that this evening. And that's something that you will always have, and that the museum will always have. You literally are writing yourself into fly fishing history, and as you should be. It's you know, it's as fitting as could be for you to be a part of true fly fishing history. And I hope that means something to you. That's not something that's given out freely or lightly, or, you know, this is something that is a special recognition of people who have made these kinds of contributions, and you know, you exemplify the best of the best. So congratulations. I wish I were there in person to share this with you, but you are now immortalized, and so I'm going to virtually pass this through the computer to you. But really, congratulations. And there it is. It's now made its way through to you. You know, I hope that you cherish this, and I hope that you recognize just how much it means, and how much you mean to the angling community. So congratulations.
Well, Fred, first of all, you know, thank you, and thank the museum so much. I'm you know, I'm honored and truly humbled. You know, it's not something I would have, you know, expected or anything, but it is really an honor. It's truly, you know, I want to thank, you know, Bob and Andy and Nick and all you guys that made this possible, and you know, just my friends and actually everybody that tuned in. You know, I know it's a different thing in a new world, and so it's you know, it's different. So you know, since I'm gonna have to probably wing it here, because my you know, I have to thank my lovely wife once again, you know, Ellen, who put up with me for all these years and everything else. I love you, honey. It's great. And you know, it's funny. Like I said, I sort of wish my mom was here and everything else. But, you know, Andy the other day asked me a question, and basically that question was, you know, he said, so what are you most proud of? And I think that if I was going to think of the thing that I'm most proud of and everything else, it's probably my kids, you know, because my kids, you know, shared this passion, and I was able to share my passion of fly fishing, and with Andrew and Austin, they took to it. You know, I've got two kids. They're now 20, 28, and 26, are just about to turn, which is a man. You see Nick, you know, turning his head. He remembers, you know, many.
They were in a playpen.
Yeah. So anyway, but it was, you know, it was my kids, and being able to share the passion of the sport and the appreciation of Mother Nature and the outdoors, and that's, you know, it's sharing with the next generation, and that's what, you know, I'm sort of proud of, is because they've taken up the torch, so to speak, and so, you know, to me, that's the thing that, you know, that really gladdens my heart nowadays, is that now I'm fishing, you know, like 3 generations. I fished their fathers, I fished sons, and now I'm fishing the grandsons, and to see these kids that are just phenomenal. I mean, I've got 10-year-old kids that would shame me when I was 25, now. I mean, and it's just, and I see in these young guys and my friends' sons, I mean, Andy, your son, Nicky, you look at how he's developed into this tremendous angler. And I look at Tim Borski's son, Joseph, and these young guys that are coming up. And these young guys that now are, on my boat, that their sons are teaching them and they're 10 years old. And so, to me, that's what really gladdens my heart and makes it, all worthwhile in your older years as we all go on and everything else. It's really, and that's why I appreciate the museum, because it's the generational stuff, that it's the next generation. And, one of the things that I always remember, and I wish my dad was here too, but when I was very young, I was probably 14, 15 years old. And I remember going out of the harbor in Newport Beach and chugging out there. And we were going 100 miles offshore to fish for longfin albacore. And he pointed and he said, I remember when we used to catch fish off that jetty, longfin albacore, when I was your age. And the worst words that I ever want to tell my kids is, I remember when. And that's what gave me the inspiration. They were the inspiration for me to get involved and to, step up and try to help the environment and try to help the fish that we all love. And that was, to me, what drove me. And so, when through the past and everything else, I've been fortunate to belong to some great organizations and some great people that are trying to do the good work, and that's sort of what I'm proud of. The inspiration is, we all want to, everybody out there right now is, you do it for your kids, for the next generation. And it's just like the museum, like I was saying. The museum holds our history, and I've always been a history buff. And when I read, Demick's book on the Book of the Tarpon, and I looked back and I thought, wow, what was it like in Florida at the turn of the century? What was it like with the striped bass when the Pilgrims came here? That I love that stuff, and I don't want it to disappear. And I want to, to have it for my kids. So I think the museum, I think the next generation, we're in good hands. I think there's some upcoming, kids and people involved in everything else, that this passion that we all share, this love of this sport of fly fishing is in good hands. And we just have to, to make good on it. So, that's the, I don't have an acceptance speech, that's sort of the crux of the thing. But, I will, since we're speaking on, for the museum and how these generations are coming and generations past and generations of the future, I actually have a little story that I'll tell you, and we'll end on this note and everything. But, I've really been fortunate in the fact that I've been able to share this passion with a lot of well-known people, a lot of celebs, a lot of, different things. And I've gotten to know, the Roger Waters and Jimmy Buffett and, and a lot of different people. And Jimmy Buffett was one of the first guys I met in the early years out there. And Jimmy had just moved up to the east end of Long Island, the Hamptons and everything else. He built his house. And we actually became friends. He would come into my shop. And the first time I ever met him was because he buzzed me almost off my platform in his huge seaplane, which was an albatross, And so Jimmy and I became friends. So one day I'm guiding and I've got a much older gentleman on board, and he's a little frail and everything else, but we're having a good time. And I said, look, at the tide's dropping. We're going to go fish this flat, down the ways. And there's a flat right in front of Jimmy Buffett's house. And so I go running down there and I'm pulling the flat, and it's just about noon and everything else. And the guy looks up and he said, that is a beautiful house. And I said, yeah, it's Jimmy Buffett's house, you know. And he said, wow, it is really beautiful, like a southern plantation. I said, yeah, it's quite spectacular. And about that time I look, and here comes Jimmy walking down the dock. And so he looks at me, he says, Paul, are you molesting my fish again? You know, I said, yes, Jimmy, I am. He said, God, last night they were all over. We were fishing with Mookie, was his son. He said, we're fishing with Mookie. So Jimmy, he says, what are you doing, Paul? And I said, we're just about to have lunch. He said, well, hook up. And so Jimmy sits down, and we sit down with this older gentleman, Ed, and we start shooting the shit. And so Jimmy says, so where you been? What's going on? And so we talked for an hour, you know, and just had a great time, and mutual friends and we're all just having fun, and we're talking fishing and everything else. And finally, Jimmy stands up. He says, I'm going to go surfing. I'll talk to you later. I said, Jimmy, thanks a lot, man. We'll talk to you soon. We'll stay in touch. See you. And as I'm puttering away and we're going, and the guy looks at me and he says, Jimmy Buffett, is that Warren Buffett's son? So I told him, I said, you go home and ask your kids. So he calls me the next day and he says, boy, my kids were so mad at me that I told them I was sitting yesterday at a dock having a sandwich with Jimmy Buffett. And I told the guide I thought it was, you know, Warren Buffett's son. So anyway, so I thank everybody. This has really been not only a pleasure, an honor, you know, to get the Izaak Walton Award. And so thank you all. And thank you all, my friends, and everybody that tuned in. I don't know who's out there or whatever, but I love you guys.
Love you, man.
Well, I'll tell you, Paul, I hope you get a chance to take a look at all of these tributes that have come in, because they're very touching. And it's, you know, that was a great acceptance speech. You just really epitomized the Izaak Walton Award, and that has been very well displayed and illustrated here tonight. So congratulations. And thank you for, you know, for being a part of this great evening and being the honoree. Andy, Nick, Bob, Marshall, Alex, thank all of you. I can't thank enough for making this such a wonderful and you know, fun and entertaining evening. And there's just, I hope you guys get to look at these tributes, because a lot of people are piping in, and so that's a really great thing. So all in, thank you very much. I just want to say one last thing, and that is that the auction closes at 9 for all of you out there. So if you want to do any last minute bidding, and you know, I hope that we will all see each other on the water soon. And once again, thank you so much, and congratulations to you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul, so much.
Absolutely.
Good evening from Manchester, Vermont. Thanks for being here. Good night.
Paulie.
See you, Nicky. Bye.
Love you, brother.
Bye, friend.